Hey, John Gilroy here. Today, we're going to talk about the Army's push for combat-ready AI. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator in the virtual studio. Today, we have Josh Wilson, CEO at a company called LMI. Josh, you've described the need for a fundamentally different development cycle for defense technology. What specifically changes when you move from traditional program of record timelines to rapid deployment measured in weeks instead of years? That's a challenge.
Well, thanks, John. I don't think I'm alone in what's been communicated, the needs and the demands of how we can be more relevant from a pace and et cetera standpoint, especially as it relates to national security. But honestly, like in relation to public health as well, we saw that during the COVID epidemic and et cetera. I think what we're talking about is a shift from language that others have highlighted as a problem, like programs of record, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason why a lot of companies around the Beltway, their growth engine, if you look at them compared to a lot of commercial organizations, is 80-90% of their growth engine is proposal shops that are really good at responding to, communicated government requirements, right? That has driven a lot of success for a lot of organizations for a long time. So that's how they've resourced their growth strategy, right? But the reality is that out of one side of your mouth, you can't be talking about how our, programming, budgeting, and requirement processes aren't iterating at the pace necessary to keep up with adversarial, and near peer activities. And then on the other side of your mouth, you're building an entire ecosystem enabled by responding at that pace to those types of processes and et cetera. And so I think what you're seeing, with things like I know we'll talk about today, like NGC2 in the Army and other programs like that, is a real shift of, hey, here's generally the problem we're trying to solve. We're going to give you access to a lot of end users, a representative environment of what we're facing. And we're going to see who can creatively solve these problems at the pace of need. And it's exciting to see the results so far.
What I see is trust. I see some heavy duty people looking at you and Andrew going, yeah, we can trust these guys at a very high level. That also takes decades to do. I mean, that doesn't happen overnight, does it, Josh?
No, it doesn't. But I would say, like, even the companies that haven't been around for decades, they're just trying to bring a new mindset and a lot of investment and creativity to these problems. I think trust is earned. And I think whereas we used to, reward a lot of people for past performance, right? Like, show me your 3 qualified past performances for this problem. And that made me feel okay, giving you a really hard challenge. I think we're saying, hey, here's the problem. Here's the reality of the environment we're operating. Come show me. And I think that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Come show me that this will work. Demonstrate that it will work. And I think trust is being earned in new ways, not in a past sense standpoint of past performances and scale and et cetera. And no, give me that thing right now that'll work and let me try it and put my hands on it and see how quickly it breaks and how quickly you respond to it breaking and making it better and more resilient.
Josh, the DOW, you're not in this boat alone. I mean, if you talk to an HR person in a civilian agency, they're going to say, how do we hire? We can't do traditional, past performance with a piece of paper that says you're good at something because everything's changing so fast. It's like, don't use that pen anymore. Everything's ink. It's changing and rapidly. And it's a much more challenging world to be successful in. Let's focus more on the Department of War here a little bit. During an earlier discussion, you mentioned that future conflicts will require command and control ecosystems that combine hardware and software, again, at speed. So what does it look like to create integrated hardware software system for something as big as the DOW?
Yeah, look, I think the big thing here, right, is that, when you talk about software and hardware and services and data and AI, okay, today, I think what you're seeing, given what's going on in the environment is like, it's going to be real tough just to be a software company. It's going to be real tough to just be a services company, candidly, or just be a hardware company. There's some contract manufacturer out there that'll do it for $1 less, right? And I would argue even just being a data or AI company doesn't necessarily position you to solve the problem or deliver the outcome. I think it's those companies that sit at the nexus of software, hardware, services, data and AI, and are orienting those capabilities and what we call, operational convergence to deliver that in a unique ways and means across all four, an outcome. If you look at what we're doing, in the shipyards and in the depots from an asset management standpoint, we're not coming in as the integrator and having the government tell us which pieces and parts we're going to use. We're showing up as the manufacturer of the hardware that's being used to track all these assets. We're delivering the software. We're doing the data. We're collecting the data. We're delivering the AI applications that are predictively helping them position assets and know where they are and how to optimize, right? So we're delivering an outcome, FFP, across that. That's the new game. That's where value creation will exist. And, Shepherd is another example of that, which I know you want to get to today. The name reflects its core mission, right? It enables the military protection cells. These are the people that have to, that are responsible for safeguarding personnel, equipment, and operations in real adversarial environments, right? Where the enemy has a vote. To do that, though, communication between applications has to exist, immediate analysis between hardware and software that enables threat intelligence, asset locations, terrain, routes, et cetera, all has to come together and converge to deliver the ultimate outcome, which is to protect. And, that's where we're going as an organization. We wanted to sit at the nexus of all those things, but oriented on very specific outcomes, which we think is the future.
Years ago, you used to watch TV, and you probably watch the Olympics too, and they'd have these divers, and they'd say degree of difficulty 3.0. And I'm taking notes. So you're talking about software services, delivers, logistics, nexus. Degree of difficulty, this is like 7. This isn't your typical. It's hard to incorporate that into an RFI or RFP. It's just, there's so many moving parts. So that's the real challenge. And I think that's why we want to maybe dive into what the Shepherd is all about. You mentioned an announcement of a partnership between LMI and Anduril. The announcement highlights what Shepherd, SHEPRD, was authorized. I guess it was authorized to handle secret classified data in IL6 in just weeks. That's nobody. No one says that. No one even says IL6. So what does your team do differently to accelerate this accreditation process without sacrificing security?
Well, it starts, I think, just culturally. I mean, several years ago, we really, we made the pivot. As I say, like we spend, I don't know, 3 times as much on our CTO organization as we do our BD organization, right? And our philosophy early on was attack the friction points. When we put great ideas in front of customers, one of the first things they ask is, yeah, Josh, this is a great looking piece of software, hardware, et cetera, but is it American made? Do the parts come from here? Right? Or second, is my CISO going to kill me, right? From a security and safety standpoint. So we invested millions of dollars in Ironsled, our environment that allows us to build things to standards that are necessary to operate safely in these, highly classified environments. So that when we show up, there's not a lot of tons of re-engineering to get it to meet certain security standards. And that's phase 1, right? Is invest differently. You can't, operate in these worlds where you're in a prove it mindset with our customers and not invest a ton of money ahead of need. The second is culturally and philosophically, we talk a lot about LMI. Be obsessed with the pace at which you can solve the customer's problem, not where the ideas always come from, right?
Yeah.
Angel's done a great job with their Lattice platform and et cetera, removing some friction points in regards to going from enterprise to edge with some of these solutions. And them, they really enabled us, along with the investments we made as a partnership, to reduce a lot of friction in regards to driving value for these soldiers. And that was the goal. And that's why the partnership really made sense.
I read your press release. I read the Anduril press release. And the Anduril one references the Army's, I think it's called the IV Sting exercises, as a proving ground for this concept. So what did you and what did LMI learn from operating alongside active Army units that really surprised you the most?
Well, look, back to the point earlier around, I have the Army is moving out of the you don't understand world. And I'll make sense out of that comment in a second. When we used to spend 18 months with really smart people, in buildings far away from actual units, working on requirements for 18 months, right? And these are not dumb people that have worked on things really hard through wargaming and exercises and et cetera. And over a very long period of time, they developed, 6,472 requirements associated with Program X
I've
that they
seen them.
then put out to an RFP and they go build something. And I remember being one of those soldiers in the field and you getting that technology and you'd say, but hey, this isn't great. Like, I don't like X or I don't want, and I'll never, you'd always get that, what you don't understand, right? And at the end of the day, like the number one thing I love about what we're doing with Ivy Sting is like that, only one vote matters, right? The people that actually have to use it
Yeah.
to protect our country is the vote that matters most in this environment. So I would say number one, that's what we love. Number two, there's no place to hide. Your stuff that's built in a lab, like candidly, I don't know of much that has gone out there into these exercises, and I don't know if there's any examples of stuff that has worked on day one.
Yeah.
Like what we have to realize, like we talk a lot about commerciality here, but like there is no commercial equivalent to command and control in a near peer environment, operating across the complexity our soldiers do today. There isn't,
Yeah.
right? Your stuff is not going to work. And I think what a lot of the companies out there are being judged on is not like how perfect their thing is on day one, but the pace at which they can configure it around what they learn, right? And the pace at which you can learn out there. I mean, we are launching capabilities. Soldiers are absolutely beating it up. Like, no, I need this, I need that, I need this. It needs to be able to do this or that. We are rebuilding through the night, updating and deploying again the next day, right?
Yeah.
So there's no question, and that's actually realistic in regards to where our country needs to be from a command and control standpoint. And my hope is that these exercises, we start thinking about these exercises just a cost of doing business. I hope it never stops. I hope it continues forever. I think it's the only way you can continue to meet the pace of need.
So, Josh, I delving into these releases and taking notes, and I think one of the most interesting themes in these announcements is the focus on outcomes over ownership. It's almost like a T-shirt, outcomes over ownership. Does this partnership represent a broader cultural shift in how government and industry collaborate on defense innovation?
Well, look, I think, look, this has been happening for a while, right? The push to, OTAs and CSOs and different ways of solving problems and procuring to solve outcomes, right? I think, what's important here, I do think that we have to continue to realize that there are places inside government that like have commercial equivalents that you should be able to take said capability from commercial and just plop it down on especially think enterprise business system stuff, HR stuff, et cetera. But I will tell you, when you talk about command and control, like I don't know that there's a lot of commercial examples there. But what we're trying to do is like commercial mindset, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not coming in, I call it bird with mouth open syndrome and saying, give me your requirements and I'll explain to you how I'm doing it. Most of us are investing millions and millions of dollars before we show up on game day with things that can be configured around a broad set of needs and are willing to FFP, right? Firm fixed price, like, okay, I'll agree to a price and I'll deliver that outcome. Or I'll agree that I will work on this and I only get paid if I solve the problem, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the mindset that we're shifting to. I hope it continues forever. I think you're seeing it like there's a lot of creative things going on. There's the trade winds marketplace, there's OTAs, there's CSOs, especially in the national security community. I don't think NGC2 is alone. I think it's just the first time we've seen these things embraced at this scale, right? I mean, this is a massive scale that this is being embraced at. And so, I hope that it's successful. I think it will be, because if it is, I don't see another way of doing things like this in the future. If it's successful, seeing the insatiable appetite of our customers, I just don't see a path back to requirements.
Well, let's focus on the little teeny tiny word you used, if. So if this rapid development pilot succeeds over the next 3 months, what does scale look like? Are we talking about a model that might, I don't know, spread across the entire Army enterprise or even other federal agencies?
Yeah, I think it has to, right? Again, but I do think, you got to differentiate. When we're talking about things like big problem sets, like some of the challenges in space, right? Command and control, et cetera. Like when you talk about some of these things, like, look, this makes sense for, right? In a real meaningful way. I also think when you talk about problems that the government has that mirror problems that exist already in the commercial side, like, I can see, that I think this is already being done in some cases in that kind of sense. In this standpoint, though, we're kind of recognizing the fact that there's no commercial solution that's going to be ready on day one for these problems. And we need an iterative way to exercise and organize around that. You will see this done at massive scale, I think, on the space side. It has to, because it's too evolving of a problem. It's too unique to national security. There's not commercial examples of this type of complexity. Commercial companies will play a huge role. But when you think about things like Golden Dome and et cetera, it needs an NGC2-like operating environment that I think does scare. This is an expensive endeavor, right? You don't want to do this on every enterprise business system. That makes zero sense.
Yeah. Well, this is an exciting development. If you're walking your dog and listening to this podcast or in the squat rack or something at the gym, what I'll do is I'll put a link in the show notes to this press release so you can dive in further. And we'll have to keep pace. Maybe later on this year, fall, we'll come back and see, well, what really did happen? And there's all kinds of flexibility. I'm glad you mentioned the space world, because many times rocket manufacturers fail. and they keep moving on, and that's part of it. But iteration is important in software development, and I think in the Department of War as well. And I have to wrap up the interview here, Josh. We're kind of running out of time here. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Josh Wilson, CEO at LMI.